Sweden just handed the United States Air Force one of the most embarrassing wake-up calls in modern military history, and almost nobody is talking about it the way they should be. Not because of a dogfight, not because of a new missile, but because of a number. A single, devastating number that exposes the quiet crisis rotting at the heart of the world's most expensive fighter jet program. Stay with me, because by the time you reach the end of this, you will never look at a defense procurement announcement the same way again. If you find yourself rethinking everything you thought you knew about modern air power after watching this, hit that like button right now. It helps more people find this analysis. The aircraft at the center of this story is not new. The Saab F-39 Gripen was conceived in 1979 in a country that had no NATO umbrella, a coastline shadowed by Soviet influence, and a brutal lesson already burned into its defense doctrine. A fighter jet is worthless if the enemy craters your runway in the first 30 minutes of a war. So Swedish engineers did something radical. They stopped asking how powerful the jet could be and started asking something far more dangerous to the American defense industry. How survivable can it be when everything around it is on fire? The answer they built was a jet that takes off from public highways, that lands on improvised gravel strips, that can be refueled, rearmed, and back in the air in under 10 minutes with a ground crew of 11 people, a maintenance truck, a fuel tanker, and a set of standard wrenches. No proprietary software access routed through a foreign government's servers. No specialized equipment that only exists at permanent airbases that enemy planners have already mapped, targeted, and preloaded into their missile systems. Just a jet, a road, and 11 people who know exactly what they are doing. Before we get to the number that is shaking defense ministries right now, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our daily updates. This story is still developing, and we cover it every single day. Now let us talk about that number, because this is where the comfortable story that Western defense ministries have been telling themselves for a decade starts to crack. The F-35 Lightning II costs somewhere between $36,000 and $40,000 per flight hour to operate. The Gripen E costs between $6,000 and $7,000 per flight hour. That is not a rounding error. That is not a procurement inefficiency that a few reforms will fix. That is a structural, foundational difference in what it costs to keep pilots in the air. And what it costs to keep pilots out of the air is what it costs your nation in trained expertise, in combat readiness, in the gap between a pilot who can execute a complex intercept in contested airspace at night in bad weather and one who simply cannot. If your jet costs 5 times more per hour to fly, your pilots train at 1/5 the rate. You are buying the world's most sophisticated aircraft and then parking it because you cannot afford to turn the engine on. And it gets worse. A June 2025 study by the U.S. Congressional Budget Office, not a Swedish think tank, not a Saab press release, the United States Congressional Budget Office, released figures that sent a quiet shockwave through every defense procurement office on the planet. The F-35 achieves mission-capable status between 50 and 60% of the time. The Gripen's validated availability rate, confirmed by Switzerland, by Brazil, by operators across 2 continents, sits between 80 and 90%. Read that again. The F-35, which costs nearly 6 times as much per flight hour, is available to actually fly roughly half the time. The Gripen, which can be maintained by 11 people on a highway, is ready to fight 9 times out of 10. A weapon that cannot be used is not a weapon. It is an invoice. This is the data that has been driving something remarkable in global defense procurement through 2025 and into 2026. Colombia announced in April 2025 that it had selected the Gripen E to replace its aging fleet. A confirmed contract for 17 aircraft was signed in November 2025 at 3.1 billion euros. Thailand, which already operated earlier Gripen models, chose the Gripen E over the F-16 Block 70 and signed for additional aircraft in August 2025. Saab reported record order bookings in its 2025 year-end results. The Gripen is no longer a niche choice for budget-constrained small nations. It is becoming the considered, deliberate selection of countries that have done the math and decided they want an air force that can actually fight. But nowhere has this debate burned hotter or revealed more about the hidden politics inside fighter jet procurement than Canada. And here is where the story takes a turn that nobody in the defense establishment wanted you to see. Canada signed a contract in early 2023 worth approximately 19 billion Canadian dollars to acquire 88 F-35A aircraft. Then, in March 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a full military review of that deal. The stated reason was over-reliance on American defense infrastructure amid rapidly deteriorating trade relations between Ottawa and Washington under the Trump administration. The review was expected to conclude by September 2025. It has not concluded. And in late 2025, a classified fighter jet evaluation originally completed in 2021 and kept quietly out of public view for years was leaked. What it contained stunned serious analysts and confirmed what some had suspected all along. According to those documents, the F-35 scored 57.1 out of 60 points, 95%. The Gripen E scored 19.8 out of 60, 33%. On the surface, that looks like annihilation. The F-35 wins so decisively it barely seems like a contest. But here is what the numbers do not tell you, and what a growing number of serious, credentialed defense analysts are now saying publicly. The evaluation did not measure which jet is better for Canada. It measured which jet is better for the United States Air Force, and then called that result Canada's answer. The most likely explanation for the enormous gap centers on how Canada's Royal Canadian Air Force chose to weight interoperability with American systems. If interoperability was buried inside the mission performance metric, where the F-35 scored 97% and the Gripen scored 22%, and if that assessment was simply a direct comparison of which aircraft, off the shelf, integrates more seamlessly with existing American platforms, then of course the American aircraft scores higher. But Saab has consistently maintained that the Gripen's software architecture is open, that Canada would acquire full source codes as part of any purchase, that interoperability gaps are solvable problems, not fixed limitations. The question that has consumed Canadian defense policy for over a year is whether the RCAF evaluated a 2021 Gripen against a hypothetical future Block 4 F-35, and whether that constitutes analysis or a predetermined conclusion wearing the costume of one. The Center for International Policy Studies published a sharply critical examination of the methodology. $17 billion, Canadian sovereignty over its own air fleet, and the question of whether a nation is buying a weapon or buying a dependency. Those are the stakes. And the dependency question deserves to be said plainly, without diplomatic softening. When you buy an F-35, you are not buying an aircraft. You are buying a license to operate one. The United States retains control over maintenance schedules, parts supply, software updates, capability upgrades, and the operational clearances that determine what your aircraft can actually do on any given day. If Washington and Ottawa are in a trade war, and in 2025 they were, that dependency is not theoretical. It is an operational vulnerability. When you buy a Gripen, you own it, full stop. You hold the source code, you decide the upgrade path, you determine the maintenance schedule. In an era when supply chains have proven fragile in ways nobody anticipated before the pandemic, and when geopolitical relationships are shifting faster than procurement cycles, the question of whether your Air Force can operate independently of a foreign government's permission is one of the most serious strategic questions a defense ministry can ask. Now let us be honest, because the Gripen's case is strong, but intellectual honesty is what separates real analysis from advocacy, and you deserve the full picture. The Gripen is not a stealth aircraft. It never claimed to be. Against a sophisticated, modern, integrated air defense system, a non-stealthy platform operating in heavily contested airspace faces a categorically different threat environment than a low observable one. The F-35's ability to penetrate those environments, to get inside defended zones and come back out, is not marketing language. It is the reason 20 nations have written enormous checks to acquire it. A 2025 U.S. Air Force report found that F-35 squadrons increase Allied effectiveness five-fold in Baltic Sea operations. In 2022, F-35s detected Russian Su-35s at 250 kilometers before any response was possible. The F-35's sensor fusion, its ability to build a comprehensive real-time battle picture and share it instantly across every Allied platform in range, is genuinely without peer in current Western aviation. It does not just see threats earlier, It makes every aircraft around it deadlier by sharing what it sees. The F-35 also trades top speed for survivability in stealth-reliant combat. Sustained supersonic flight generates heat that degrades stealth coatings and elevates infrared signature, so the F-35 caps out around Mach 1.6 by design. The Gripen reaches Mach 2. For a country with vast Arctic airspace to cover, rapid interception over enormous distances, that speed difference is not trivial. These are not mistakes. They are engineering answers to different strategic questions. Neither aircraft is wrong. They were designed for different wars. The Gripen E, the current production variant, is a substantially different machine from the aircraft that launched the platform's reputation. It is 3% larger than earlier models, carries 40% more fuel, extends its operational range to approximately 4,000 kilometers, and is equipped with the Leonardo Raven AESA radar, advanced electronic warfare with spherical coverage, passive sensor arrays that dramatically expand pilot situational awareness, and the ability to deploy bright cloud expendable active decoys. In several specific operational categories, analysts have placed its capability not far behind the F-35A, and in some narrower metrics ahead of it. Then there is the Meteor missile, widely regarded as the most capable beyond visual range air-to-air missile in active service anywhere in the world. The Meteor's ramjet propulsion system gives it a no-escape zone dramatically larger than the AIM-120 AMRAAM that equips American fighters. A Gripen carrying a Meteor is not a platform hoping to survive an engagement. It is a platform that can credibly threaten modern opponents at ranges where the stealth advantages of fifth-generation aircraft begin to erode. Because a missile that cannot be outrun does not care how low your radar cross-section is. The global sales picture as of early 2026 tells its own story about where the world's air forces are placing their confidence. More than 280 Gripens across all variants have been delivered. Colombia's contract for 17 aircraft was confirmed in November 2025. Thailand signed for additional Gripen E jets in August 2025. And Saab's record order bookings in its 2025 annual report point clearly toward sustained growth. The Gripen is not a consolation prize for nations that cannot afford something better. It is the deliberate first choice of defense ministries that want genuine capability, genuine independence, and a maintenance burden that does not collapse under the pressure of a prolonged, high-intensity conflict. What does this mean for the future of air power? It means the era of one universal answer is ending. The F-35 is extraordinary at the specific mission it was designed for, penetrating the most sophisticated air defense systems on Earth, surviving in environments where anything detectable is killable, sharing battlefield data across allied networks in ways that multiply coalition lethality. For nations fighting alongside the United States against peer adversaries like China or Russia, the F-35's network integration and low observability give it an indispensable role. No serious analyst disputes this, but the Gripen represents an equally serious truth that the defense establishment has been quietly absorbing for 2 years now. That wars are also won through numbers, through availability rates above 80% when your adversary's jets are grounded half the time, through pilot training hours that are affordable enough to build genuine expertise instead of managing chronic shortfalls, through operational infrastructure that requires a highway and 11 people instead of a hardened airbase that your enemy targeted before the first shot was fired, and through sovereign control of your own armed forces, the ability to fight your war on your terms without waiting for a foreign government's software authorization. The bluntest version of this comparison is not comfortable for the programs that consumed the most money. A fighter available 50% of the time that has not yet delivered its advertised capabilities, that costs so much to operate that adequate training is effectively impossible, and that can be functionally grounded by a political decision in Washington, measured against a fighter available more than 80% of the time, affordable enough to fly the hours that build real pilots, capable of delivering exactly what it promises, and under complete national control. That is not a hypothetical. That is the actual operational comparison that defense ministers in Bogota, Bangkok, Ottawa, and a dozen other capitals are making right now, daily, with real money and real national security on the line. The scrappy Swedish jet born in the Cold War, designed to land on a highway outside Linköping, is making the strongest strategic argument of its existence. Not because it outsteeths the F-35, not because it outcensors it or outnetworks it, but because it shows up every day, ready to fly, under your flag, on your terms, and in the kind of war the world actually appears to be heading toward. Dispersed, infrastructure targeting, peer-adversary conflict where fixed bases become craters in the first hour, that might be the most important capability of all. We track every development in this procurement battle daily. The Canada decision, the new Saab contracts, the F-35 availability data as it updates. If you want analysis that does not wait a week to tell you what happened yesterday, follow this channel. And if this video changed how you see the debate, share it with someone who still thinks the most expensive jet is automatically the best one. The comment section is open. Which aircraft would you choose if the budget were yours? If this kind of deep, daily defense analysis is what you are looking for, subscribing takes 2 seconds and means you never miss the next one.